Hello and welcome to round 5 of Battle of the Decade Season 2, the show where I take the best selling albums of each year in the UK and feed them through the Battle of the Decades tournament format to find out what was the best decade in music. So, a quick recap of the rules. Firstly, no albums from the 1960s will be included, as sales data from that era is notably unreliable. Secondly, the albums will now get 10 points for each ranking position and stars of their star rating. For example, if an album comes in first place, it'll get 50 points. If it also has 5 stars, that'll be another 50 points for a maximum total of 100 points. And on this episode, we're going to be throwing all the 4s into the ring: 1974, 1984, 1994, 2004 and 2014. So, let's have a look at our Albums of the Year roster. From 1974, we have Band on the Run by Paul McCartney and Wings. From 1984, we have Can't Slow Down by Lionel Richie. From 1994 we have Music Box by Mariah Carey. From 2004 we have Scissor Sisters by Scissor Sisters. And from 2014 we have X by Ed Sheeran. So now the battlefield has been prepared, let's be complete rankers and rank into the very fabric of time itself. This is Battle of the Decade Season 2, Round 5. Coming in last place this week we have Music Box by Mariah Carey from 1993, which was the iconic pop diva's third LP. And this album saw Mariah at the peak of her success, going 5 times platinum in the UK and spawning 4 top 10 singles, including a number 1 hit via her cover of Badfinger's Without You. The record would go on to sell over 28 million copies worldwide, making it one of the biggest selling albums of all time. And in terms of quality, it's alright, but it isn't anything special either. In fact, Music Box is dead centre of exactly what you'd expect to find on a 1990s R&B and diva pop record. There are precisely 0 surprises to be found here. I suppose that if you really love R&B and diva pop, that might be a plus and you could probably get some mileage out of this LP. But for me, this record is decidedly bland and cookie cutter. It's not egregious, indeed it could even be touted as innocuously pleasant when used as ignorable background music, but there's nothing on this that grabs my attention or calls me back for more. Highlights from a rather flat release includes the opening single Dream Lover, which has a slick and easy R&B radio pop glide to it. It's exactly what you'd expect it to be in a kind of pleasant way. Title track Music Box is quite pretty via the way it strips things back to let Mariah's voice completely dominate. While her number 1 hit and cover of Badfinger's Without You works because A, it's just a really well written ballad in general, and B, its bombastic chorus was born to be sung by powerfully voiced pop divas. I mean, say whatever you want about Mariah Carey, but only a fool would suggest that she's not a talented singer. Her voice is pretty darn good. Specific negatives, other than the record just being kind of beige and forgettable in general, would boil down to the tracks Now That I Know and I've Been Thinking About You, which are just so full of janky early 90s acid house keys that they instantly repel. That stuff has aged so poorly that Mariah may as well retitle the latter track to I've Been Thinking About Strangling You. So yeah, as I said, this record is alright. It might even pass muster as ignorable background fluff. But when I do give it my undivided attention, as I have done for this episode, I also find it to be a little bit tedious. Plus it's just not something that I'd ever want to listen to outside of this channel. 2.5 stars, which gives the 1990s a score of 35 points. Next up we have Can't Slow Down by Lionel Richie from 1983, which was the ex-Commodore singer's second solo LP. And this was Richie's biggest selling LP, going 3 times platinum in the UK and serving up 3 top 10 singles, including the number 1 hit Hello. The record went on to sell over 20 million copies worldwide and became one of the biggest selling albums of the 1980s. And what we have here is a number 1 1980s pop and easy listening LP with some R&B and funk elements creeping in around the edges. It kinda reminds me of Billy Joel in tone, which is not a bad thing as I do like a nice bit of Billy. Although it also reminds me of solo Phil Collins, which is a bad thing because solo Phil Collins totally sucks donkey balls. But in terms of quality, this album falls somewhere in between. I do mildly enjoy the record and there are some songs that I like, but much like the Mariah Carey album, it doesn't inspire much in the way of excitement and is a bit ho-hum and middle of the road overall. One good thing about this LP though is that it only has 8 songs, so each one is more clearly defined and easy to remember, even if the quality is not always there. Highlights on a decent but not exactly earth-shattering release includes All Night Long, which has an enjoyable Calypso Caribbean vibe that sounds like cocktails by the pool at sunset. Its iconic catchiness also doesn't hurt. Penny Lover is a nice Loge ballad that has a good go at bottling those easy listening Billy Joel vibes. The mind boggles as to what a penny lover actually is though. I mean, does he mean that he's paid some hard up street skank a penny for a blowjob? Or is he literally singing about someone who loves pennies and swims around in them like Scrooge McDuck? I guess it could be a combo of the two, which means he would be Scrooge McFuck. Running with the Night is actually pretty good with its pulsating rhythmic energy and rampaging guitar solo climax. While closing, number 1 smash hit Hello delivers some smooth iconic balladry that has a pleasing richness to its sound palette. As an aside, I noticed that Richie's merch tab sells baggage tags that read, "Hello, is it me you're looking for?" That made me chuckle. Sadly, there are some tracks that don't quite cut the mustard on here too. Opening title track Can't Slow Down seems to be perpetually fumbling around for a hook that it never quite finds. Laid back funk number Love Will Find a Way is way too long for its own good, sailing past the 6-minute mark when 3 would have sufficed. While the only one goes too hard on the saccharine, earnest, hand on my heart, I love you so much vibes. Its toffee balladry is so sickly sweet that I feel like I need to go out and kneecap a toddler to regain some kind of karmic balance. So yeah, ultimately this is MOR personified. It's totally middle of the road. As I said, I do mildly enjoy it, but I doubt it's a record that I'll ever take the time to revisit again. 3 stars, which gives the 1980s a score of 50 points. Next up we have the eponymous debut LP by Scissor Sisters from 2004. And what we have here is a flamboyant album of rock, pop and club disco that is dedicated to the LGBTQ community of the band's native New York City. And the album gained quite a bit of fanfare and acclaim for that aspect, with the Gay Mag Attitude proclaiming it to be the best gay album of all time. Strangely, the record was not a success in its native USA and sold in meagre numbers, but it was a rip-roaring smash all across Europe, including the UK, where it went 9 times platinum and offered up 2 top 10 singles and 3 other top 20 hits. And it's, well, frankly, it's all over the place. Firstly, let's get the LGBTQ stuff out of the way. I don't give a shit about any of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a libertarian. We only have one life, so I believe that you should do whatever makes you happy as long as it doesn't hurt other people. I also believe that there shouldn't be any restrictions placed on people's sexuality. I mean, I have no idea why people are so resistant to same-sex marriages and the like. What the fuck does it matter what other people do and who they love? But surprisingly, this LP doesn't really push its agenda that hard. The blurb around the album screams LGBTQ in capital letters, but within the confines of the music itself, it just sounds like any other pop record. I mean, if you hadn't shouted at me about the gay nature of the record, I probably would have been none the wiser, which I like. Again, I'm a libertarian, but I have no desire to be preached at about gay rights and hardships for 40 minutes either. But anyway, back to the quality of the record. As I said, it's all over the shop. It's been a while to come across a record that swings so wildly between good and bad as this one. When this album is good, it's a lot of fun. When it's bad, it's the absolute drizzling shits. So let's start off with the good stuff. Opening track Laura kicks the record into touch with a slithering rhythm and an instantly catchy chorus. The famous keyboard riff and undulating wah-wah guitars are also pretty cool. Take Your Mama has some classic Elton John vibes powering its grooving keyboard pop. Mary has a relaxing nighttime atmosphere lingering around its laid-back balladry. Tits on the Radio is a good bit of funky fun with its dumb but undeniably catchy chorus. It Can't Come Quickly Enough is pretty good with its dark 1980s new wave feel and haunting backing vocals. While Closer, Return to Oz is awesome. It's 1960s psychedelic acoustic shimmy taking its place as the best song on the record by a country mile. Which is infuriating. Like Scissor Sisters, if you can make bangers like that, why are you wasting my time with garbage level Eurotrash pop? I mean, what are you doing? Also, the movie Return to Oz used to scare the absolute piss out of me when I was a kid. That witch Mombi who steals women's severed heads is just pure nightmare fuel. Talking about nightmare fuel, the bad tracks on this can straight up do one. The band's disco cover of Pink Floyd's Comfortably Numb was their breakout hit, but it's utter guff. The anemic, repetitive Eurotrash composition and high-pitched vocals make me want to purposely rupture my eardrum with the nearest dildo. Lovers in the Backseat is horrendous with its awful, sickly keyboard tones that sound like audio vomit. I officially petitioned to have the title changed to Dog Shit in the Backseat. Music is the Victim, well, the title says it all really. Still, it's an inept rocker with an ugly melody. While Filthy/Gorgeous, which was inexplicably a top 10 single in the UK, serves no earthly purpose except to annoy with its nauseating melody and vocals that sound like getting repeatedly hoofed in the gooch. Ugh. So yeah, this album is an over-the-top explosion of colour that is also a bit of a car crash. But unlike the previous two albums on this episode, it is at least interesting. I mean, even when it's bad, it's so bad that it at least catches your attention with its crappiness. Still though, I don't want to hear the unforgivable clunkers on this ever again in my entire life. 3 stars, which gives the 2000s 60 points. Next up we have X by the English singer-songwriter Ed Sheeran from 2014, which was his second LP. And boy oh boy, this album was a monster, going 13 times platinum in the UK, producing 2 number 1 hit singles via Sing and Thinking Out Loud, and breaking records as the album to stay the longest in the UK Albums Chart Top 10. It also went on to become the 3rd biggest selling LP of the 2010s overall. And stylistically speaking, what we have here is a mostly acoustic guitar based record that mixes folk, rap and trip hop elements with a kind of raw, honest lyricism that's obviously very personal and meaningful to Sheeran himself. This is an album where the artist is pulling back the curtain and really letting you have a peek in on his personal life. Whether or not that's interesting is a different kettle of fish, but in his own way, Ed Sheeran is kind of genuinely bearing his soul on this. So, in the past I have lampooned Ed Sheeran on this channel as a charismaless void, especially when compared to pop stars and rock stars from older generations. And whilst from a public persona standpoint I would still stand by that, I still have to eat a little crow here because this album really surprised me. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Am I becoming an Ed Sheeran fan? No, but at least now I can see his appeal and begrudgingly admit that the guy does have some actual talent. In fact, there's not a whole heck of a lot to complain about here. I mean, there are some throwaway, more directly pop-orientated tunes dotting around such as Nina, Bloodstream and Runaway, but they're also fine in an ignorable kind of way and certainly not worth throwing your toys out of your pram for. Length is also a minor issue. The album is 50 minutes long, which is too long in my opinion. Shave 10 minutes off of that and we'd really be in business. And finally, the song Photograph ever so slightly niggles me. Although the wilting melody on the track is nice, the lyrics feel inauthentic and emotionally manipulative. It sounds like a song that's been specifically written to be a hit. One of Ed Sheeran's charm points is the way he speaks from his heart on most of the tracks. Photograph, on the other hand, feels like he's speaking from his wallet. But otherwise, this is pretty good stuff. One opens up the record with some lovely picked folk and romantic lyricism, as Sheeran drawls, "All my senses come alive as I stumble back home as drunk as I've ever been." What? Ed, you pussy-ass lightweight. You ain't as drunk as you've ever been until you wake up in a police station with your head in the overnight cell's toilet bowl and no memory of how you got there. And you call yourself British. Sing features some impressive rapping that adds a dynamism to the usual acoustic pop strains. Don't continues the impressive raps but adds a sultry groove and some pretty good "my girlfriend's cheating on me" lyrics. And I never saw him as a threat until you disappeared with him to have sex, of course. It's not like we were both on tour. We were staying on the same fucking hotel floor. Oof. Ouch. The likes of I'm a Mess and Tenerife Sea are decent folky acoustic cuts with easy melodies and a personal touch to the lyrics. While Thinking Out Loud is a big tuneful ballad with some great Stevie Wonder / Martin Gaye energy propelling it forward. So yeah, Ed Sheeran has made a good pop record here that has enough catchiness, melodic astuteness and lyrical potency to make it more than worthwhile. Is it ever going to be a go-to record or style for me personally? No, but it is enough to make me put a bit more respect on Ed's name going forward. Which is a shame, as I quite enjoyed slagging off the bloat-faced ginger nut. 4 stars, which gives the 2010s a score of 80 points. Coming in first place this week, we have Band on the Run by Paul McCartney and Wings from 1973, which was the band's third LP. Paul McCartney's post-Beatles work hadn't quite caught fire in the way that he or his record company would have wanted, either critically or commercially prior to this. But thankfully, Band on the Run became a slow burn success story, mainly off the back of his 2 UK top 10 singles, Jet and the title track Band on the Run. The album eventually went platinum and hit number 1 in both the UK and the US. It also restored Paul McCartney's critical standing after a few notable duds. The making of the LP was also quite interesting in a turbulent kind of way. Paul wanted to record the album in an exotic location, so perused the list of the record company's worldwide studios before deciding on one in Lagos, Nigeria. Paul pictured himself recording during the day and relaxing on the beach in the evening. Unfortunately, the silly bugger missed the news that Lagos had just finished a civil war and was an unstable, dirty war zone that was very dangerous for foreign tourists. So it didn't turn out to be the paradise that he wanted, with him and Linda McCartney being robbed at knife point while strolling around the city, and the record company sending emergency notices about outbreaks of cholera. To add insult to injury, 2 members of the band abruptly quit a few days before they were due to depart, which led Paul to also have to play the drums and the lead guitar parts on the record. Plus the studio barely worked and was basically falling to pieces. Wow, I mean, it just sounds like a disaster, but I bet that was one hell of a memorable trip. So all in all, I guess it's a kind of a miracle that Band on the Run turned out to be so great. And it is great. The record has a jangly, lightweight catchiness that doesn't sound too far away from the brilliance of the Beatles. The quality is kept pretty high across the tracklist, and Paul's ability to craft great melodies is very much on display here. As for nitpicks, well, there's actually not that much to complain about, but I would say that the song, Picasso's Last Words, Drink to Me, does amble about a bit, getting lost in unnecessary callbacks and never really finding a good hook to justify its existence. It's a questionable tune on an otherwise fantastic album. Highlights on a charming ride would include the opening title track Band on the Run, which is awesome with its proggy structure and insane level of catchiness. Jet is a great glam-inflected banger that is also catchy as all hell. Bluebird impresses with its beautiful melody, wispy gentleness and lovely vocal harmonies. Mrs. Vanderbilt has a sprightly energy with its touches of saxophones and memorable chants of "Hey, hey ho," while Mamounia has a delightfully fragile melody to its picked acoustics that hides just a touch of melancholy under the surface. So yeah, and in the organ-kissed ballad Let Me Roll It and the driving piano rock closer 1985, and you have an LP that stands as the most beloved of Paul McCartney's post-Beatles work, 4.5 stars, which gives the 1970s a score of 95 points. So, stop pooping into empty Snickers wrappers, sealing them up and putting them back on shop shelves, and turn your attention to the scoreboard. The 1970s sprint into the lead with 450 points. The 1980s plump for second with 405 points. The 2010s move up a spot into third with 310 points. The 2000s drop down into fourth with 295 points. And still struggling to draw breath in last remains the 1990s with 200 points. And that's round 5 of Battle of the Decade Season 2 in the bag. Of course, I know you'd rank these records differently, so why not sound off in the comments and tell me how you'd rank them. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.